Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video I'd like to discuss the ongoing issue of the one rule for them and another for us, kicking off with Nigel Farage for photographing himself breaking the law yesterday and then boasting about it on social media. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, not for the first time, Nigel Farage has photographed himself in breach of the coronavirus regulations. On this occasion, it's regarding the quarantine rules. Now, Nigel Farage may have been given presidential permission to visit the United States in what should have been a breach of their rules. In fact, when he was photographing himself from America, a lot of people were looking at him going, hang on a minute, the US says you're not allowed to come to America from the UK. What's going on here? I didn't make anything of it because I knew what was going on. Obviously, he's gone there to support Donald Trump's rally, which turned out to be something he'd rather forget. So obviously, Donald Trump will have given him special presidential permission to do so. That's fine. But there's no such exemption provided to him on his return to this country, because there are rules that state if you are travelling to the UK from the United States, you must quarantine for 14 days. Now, there was a little bit of an updated list yesterday, or no, day before now, on countries where you don't have to quarantine if you've come from these countries. The United States is still not on that list. If you come from the United States, you still have to quarantine for 14 days. Now, I'm not entirely certain exactly when Nigel Farage returned to the UK. I don't know on what day he did that. But his chief reason for visiting America was to attend an event on June the 20th. This means that the earliest he could possibly have arrived back in the UK was Sunday, June the 21st, because it was an all-day thing in America. Now, that would mean that he'd have to have quarantined until at least, at the point at which you're watching this, today. That's at least. That's assuming he arrived back on the Sunday, which means goes to Donald Trump's rally, sits in an empty tent all day because they expected 1 million people and they got like a few. And he immediately scuttled back to the UK to run away from the taint of failure yet again. And then he'd still have to have quarantined until, at the point at which you're watching this video, today. Not yesterday. Yesterday would be day 13 under that scenario. So that would mean he'd have to have quarantined until Sunday, July the 5th, just for the avoidance of doubt there. So to disappear off to the pub on Saturday, the 4th of July, would be a breach of the regulations on quarantining, because as of yesterday at noon, when he photographed himself, it was certainly less than 14 days since arriving in the UK. Now, Nigel Farage did try to defend himself by saying that he'd had a test and so was fine. Actually, no, it's not. Apart from anything else, what test? Are you allowed a test? Didn't have any symptoms. Don't get a test. I mean, maybe you get a private test. Does that still count? How do we know that that's true? In terms of, because that's not by an official company then, is it? But the key point is that a negative test, even if he'd had one, which he hasn't, doesn't exempt you anyway. The government page detailing the exemptions from quarantine do not cover that excuse. Then there was the other excuse. He said that he'd been back for 2 weeks already. Now, here's the thing. As I've already said, at the point at which he was in the pub yesterday, 2 weeks previously, he was photographing himself in the United States. Silly beggar hasn't even deleted the tweet. So that is also not true. So I would expect another visit from the police, as happened when he broke the law when the lockdown was in full swing, because surely this is a more serious law he's breaking. Certainly carries a stiffer penalty. I mean, the penalty for breaking the law the first time he did it was something like, and it's not always applied either, it was something like a £65 fine. This one carries a £1,000 fine. That implies it's a more serious law. Except on, as I say, on this occasion, I don't actually know whether we definitely get the fine. I mean, given that you're going to boast about it on social media, you really should. Not that that would worry him, of course. The money, he can afford the money. I think it's just the principle. These elites don't like it when people say they have to follow the rules. They don't like it when they're being told they don't get away with breaking the rules that he thinks are just for the ordinary people that he only pretends to be when it suits him. Unless, of course, no action is taken. If no action is taken, at the point at which I'm doing this video, I haven't seen the police talking about this, but I'd give it a few days, to be honest. But if that happens, then, well, it really is a case of elites getting to ignore the rules that would see you or I punished appropriately. Because after all, he's provided all of the evidence for his rule breaking himself on his own Twitter account. And isn't it odd how whenever you see these examples of rule breaking, it's the people who argued that we should leave the EU so that we could have entirely British-made laws? The very same people who bang the drum of patriotism to further their own ends have nothing but contempt for the entirely British-made rules, because these are British rules. And this follows hot on the case of Stanley Johnson, the Prime Minister's father, for example. You know, a few days ago, he notably travelled to Greece in breach of Greek rules and in contradiction of British government advice. He circumvented Greek's rules by travelling via Bulgaria, which sort of highlights how you really need to tighten up regulations to avoid this obvious sort of rule dodging. Shouldn't just be if you're coming from the UK or these other countries that you have to quarantine, or that you're not even, in fact, that one, you're not even allowed in the country. You should really say if you've even been in that country in the last, say, 2 or 3 weeks. But anyway, that's up to Greece. If Greece want to let him get away with that, that's up to them. Fine. Of course, his son, the Prime Minister, refused to criticise his father for ignoring the guidance that would have had criticism aplenty from the PM if ordinary people did so. But Government Minister Grant Shapps, in a different interview that same day, when it was revealed, made clear that the Prime Minister's father would have to quarantine for 14 days upon his return to the UK. He said he would definitely. It was only guidance that he shouldn't go to Greece. I mean, that in it is fair enough in some ways, because obviously we can't say you're not allowed to travel to this particular country because it's that country's hazard if they want to let you in. We can just advise against it. But the rules in terms of people coming into this country, they are for us to set. And Grant Shapps said he is going to have to quarantine for 14 days. Absolutely fine with that. No problems. And, you know, like I said, if Greece wants to take no action against an arsehole who makes their regulations look foolish just by visiting another country before going to there, that is up to them. But at least he would be made to quarantine when coming back to dear old Blighty. Not that that is a serious issue for such a wealthy man, because he won't exactly be doing so in a box room. But at least it would be following the rules, and he'd be, you know, making play of the fact that he's following the rules same as the rest of us. Only kidding. Within hours of this story breaking, the UK government had announced that people travelling to the UK from Greece would not have to quarantine. I mean, say what you like about our current government, and I say plenty several times a day. Let it not be said that they do not have a sense of humour. There it is. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.